Jetzt zum Abschluss beschäftigen wir uns.
Finish, we'll look at two interesting subjects, and I would like to welcome first Mr. Keller, who had a project that we mentioned yesterday, which is looking after fences, how to do it, and what are the possibilities. I'm looking forward to a short and interesting presentation. Let's start with the last 3/4 of an hour of the day.
Ja, vielen Dank. Genau, ich lade kurz meine Präsentation noch hoch.
Yes, thank you. I'm just kind of uploading my presentation.
Genau, mein Name ist Oliver Häußler. Ich studiere an der
My name is
Hochschule
Oliver
Weihenstephan-Triesdorf,
Häußler.
wie schon gesagt wurde, an der HSBT Agrartechnik. Und letztes Semester durfte ich zusammen mit Luisa Scharf, Dominik Paul und Josef Döpper
I am giving my presentation about mowing robots. Habe ich nicht.
Die Aufgabenstellung, die wir hatten
So
letztes Semester, den Bedarf, wovon der auch abhängig ist.
I will talk about the demand, and I will also compare various robots. I will also show the challenges. I will show you some test series and generally talk you to the result. So, as you know, the wolf is at home again since 2000, and there were approximately 1,600 animals in 2021. And here you can see in Bavaria how the distribution of the maps are. There are some sightings of wolves and reports in the yellow areas. That is where you have sedentary wolves, and around it you also have the funding frameworks. In Bavaria, the at-risk areas measure 57,405 kilometers, and the number of funding applications increases constantly. In 2020, there were 427 applications. In 2021, there were 781, and from 1 to 3, 2022, there had already been 108 applications. The prerequisite for the fence is that the bottom strand must be 20 centimeters above the floor. The grass grows, and therefore, in order to avoid short circuits, it has to be mowed. So therefore, the task was automated mowing underneath the protection fence, and also to analyze the work input that this requires and whether it would also be usable for other fences. The problem is that we have to ensure that the mowing robot mows these 20 centimeters underneath the bottom strand. The demand of mowing robots depends on the time required, for example, for maintenance and installation, and also on a comparison with the requirement, the working requirement for alternative techniques, and also fundability. The advantage of the mowing robot is that it's autonomous and that is also low noise. These are the ones that we looked at. We received the Landroid L1500 and also the Crest Mega. These two models are relatively similar. They come from Kusitech. The difference is the cutting width and also the speed and also the battery. In other words, the running duration. The running duration of the battery translates in the first model to 1.9 kilometers and in the second model to 3.8 kilometers. The height is in both cases about 22 to 25 centimeters. Here you have a sensor at the top, and that sensor, as we will hear afterwards, would nevertheless not have been needed. So what are the challenges? The challenges is the height. We have these 20 centimeter limit, and the robots have to drive below the fence. There should also be a limiting cable at a height of approximately 20 centimeters. And also there was the question of disturbances with extraneous voltages. Now about the test series, first of all, we started to commission these mowing robots and
ja, seine Funktionsfähigkeit zu überprüfen.
we checked the functionality of the mowing robots.
Danach haben wir einen weiteren Versuch gemacht,
After that, we did another test series where we had a limiting wire
einfach mal zu testen, ob der Mähroboter
just in
überhaupt
order
unter
to
die Grenze fährt.
see whether the robot drives below the limit wire. And also there was the need for the robots to go around the posts, not into them. The next thing was that we wanted to find out whether there would be a disturbance with other equipment, electrical equipment.
Ja, daraufhin haben wir eine Frequenzmessung gemacht.
After that, we did a measurement, a frequency measurement, in order to find out whether the limit cable could be replaced through the grazing fence device, well, through the electricity strand of the grazing fence. As far as the height was concerned, we wanted to take long insulators, and we took a link that was movable for extended insulators. Let us now come to the results. First of all, we found out that the obstacle recognition is not active. The meadow edge cut means that it goes back, the robot goes out, then it goes back to the charging station, and then it goes out again. Basically, it was intended to mow the private lawn, but had to be adapted. On the grass, you can activate ultrasound obstacle detector, but in the Landroid it was not possible anymore. You couldn't convert the software, but the manufacturer was very cooperative, and well, we could ask them a lot of information about programming the equipment. Then we found out that the off-road ability was something that needed to be improved. Several times the robot got stuck, and also as it tried to drive onto and dock onto the charging station, it sometimes had problems. Therefore, we constructed a holder because we found out that this bit had to be directly centered in order to enable the charging process. Here we can see a video. I'm sorry, I cannot hear the speaker over the noise of the video. Cannot hear the speaker over the noise of the video. I'm awfully sorry, please. You must tell them to switch off the sound of the video.
Herr Häußler? Man hat jetzt nur die Robotergeräusche gehört.
So we only heard the robot noises, not your voice.
Vielleicht können Sie es nochmal sagen.
Perhaps you can say it again. Yeah, just give me a second.
Ich kann auch einfach nochmal teilen und den Ton weglassen.
So share it, but leave out the sound.
Jetzt müsste man es, glaube ich, wieder sehen.
So it should be visible now.
Ja, hier sieht man, wie der Mähroboter fährt. Es gibt keine Probleme mit der Stromlitze.
As you can see that there are no problems with the electricity strand, and
quasi nicht nutzen können.
We found out that the grazing fence device could be used as a limiter,
Fährt der Mähroboter hier über die Ultraschallsensoren.
A result, we use the
Das Problem
ultrasound
ist, dass er noch viel
sensors. The
zu größere
problem
Bogen und
is
Pfosten macht. Das könnte man
that
eventuell softwaretechnisch
the
beheben.
curve around the post
Und
is,
ja,
well, the radius is too big. It should go closer to the post.
Ja, einen Versuch zu starten, der auch wirklich funktioniert hat.
Then we started a test that
Funktionsrad
actually
zum
did
einen
work.
auf den
We
Boden verlegt gehabt,
used
und danach per
the
Ladestation
limiting
in der
table
Luft,
on the
wie man hier
ground,
sieht,
and
der
then
Mähroboter gleich aus der Ladestation, er fährt jetzt los.
another one in the air. You can
Macht
see
sich auf
the
den Weg.
robot as it
Das
leaves
war
the
zum
charging
ersten Posten.
station. It drives
Und
towards the
er fährt
first
jetzt in dem Fall ohne diese
post,
Hinderniserkennung und kann somit
and it
entlang von der begrenzten
doesn't use
Straße zum
the
Posten fahren. Wie man hier
obstacle
auch sieht,
recognition
ist
now,
der
so it
Abstand noch ein
can
bisschen
go
zu
very
gering
close to
gewählt.
the post. Actually, the distance was a little bit
Weil er
too
versucht, dass er
small.
am Pfosten rumdrückt, aber er hat es mit
It
Erfolg
pushes
geschafft,
itself around the post,
zu fahren,
but
und das hat dann
nevertheless, it
eine
managed to
Umdrehung gemacht.
negotiate the post, and it did that also after several times going around the post. Now, about the economic assessment,
Schafsbetrieb und hat auf einer Länge von
Joseph
140 Metern
Tepper has a farm. He has 540 meters total length and a certain slope. 7.5 meters is the consumption of the mowing thread, and in the motor there is some kind of
Und wenn man dann die Verfahrenskosten
some
kalkuliert,
kind of wear, and ultimately you come to 6.19, and then 1 hectare goes to 5 hectare. 10 hectares is subdivided into three parcels, and so on. In the end, what do you get?
Wert von 12,71 Cent.
Is that you get 12.71 cent per meter for 1 hectare. It's 5.18 cent per meters for 50 hectares. For 8, you have
Betriebsinventar ist, sind wir bei hier
6
lediglich nur 3,75
point
pro Meter.
54, but for 5 you only get 3.75 cent per meter. The working costs account 22 to 54% of the process costs. The lifetime was assumed to be 5 years.
Genau, zur arbeitswirtschaftlichen Bewertung von dem Mähroboter.
Now let's look at the analysis, economic analysis of the mowing robot that did actually work. We have an average fence length of 348 meters. The mowing speed is 0.35 meters per second. Then you get 17 minutes that the robot needs for the 348 meters. And then we also did some additions, added values, for example, post diameter, mowing radius around the post, and also isolators and distance between posts. So for cutting out, the mowing robot takes 22 minutes.
Und bei 6 Monaten,
and for 6 months,
dann ca. 26,5 Stunden.
You get 26.6. The operating costs for the mowing robot are clearly lower than for a motor
Damals mit dem Beispiel von 0,36 Euro pro Kilowatt
size, and then we have for the electricity the value of 0.36 and ultimately you get a value overall of 0.24, and the motor size has 6.19 euros per hour. That is the reference value, the benchmark value. And if you then calculate it for the Android for 1 hectare, we have 2.699 cent per meter, and for 50 hectares it's 0.07, and then we have the working stations of the working station and also the blades. It is much cheaper if you compare it to the motor size. For 1 meter, it has 3.75 cent, and for 50 also 3.75. And if you buy a new motor size,
dann kostet 12,71
then it costs you 12.71 instead of 2.69 cent.
Was noch vergessen habe, der Landroid wurde hier mit einer Nutzung.
What is forgotten is that the Landroid was calculated for a period of 10 years. Let's come to the conclusion. Well, there is a possibility to certainly cut out the grazing fence with the mowing robot, and basically there are quite some savings to be reaped also for average and permanent operation. The performance is sufficient. As far as off-road ability is concerned, there need to be some adjustments, and the use in steep slope territories is questionable. The idea is to perhaps also do a caterpillar drivetrain and perhaps also a lower shape in order to achieve the height target of 20 centimeters. Okay, so I'm available for questions now. Thank you for this informative question. I just have one comment.
Mehr Posten benötigt werden, damit dieser Zauner in Gelände besser angepasst ist. Aber ich denke, das könnte man rechnerisch.
The fence actually has to be calculated through, and then on top of that, maybe you'd have to add these costs that you just mentioned. But what was the grass height that you calculated, or did you try out different grass heights as well? So when do you, from which height of the grass do you actually give up? Well, in the crest video, you could see that it several times went around a certain patch because the grass blades were too long, but this didn't have too much. And of course,
nach dem Winter das erste Mähen vermutlich mit der Motorsäge
after the winter, the first mowing has to be done with the mowing scythe. And if you then use the mowing robot at regular intervals, then it shouldn't have any problems. But there is a high probability that for the first time run, you need the motor scythe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ich denke, damit haben wir die Frage von der Marie Neuwald beantwortet.
I think that also answers Marie Neuwald's question, which is how high the vegetation is allowed to be. The second question is from Renika Hebel. She wants to know whether the companies are planning further development and whether they are planning to do a next generation with a lower and more compact design, or perhaps also with a Caterpillar drivetrain. Well, the only thing that I do know
und der ist zur Verfügung gestellt und die waren auch sehr offen,
is
das Dinge zu verändern, auch in ihrer Software zu verändern.
That the companies were listening very attentively when we proposed possible changes.
Dann gebe ich das Wort direkt weiter zu Herrn
Well, then I pass the word, because there has been a sign here. Well, thank you very much for having taken the opportunity to give this presentation. You did it very well. Number one, the company would be interested in pursuing this subject. I was very enthusiastic about how far the group came in the summer. It was basically a project work of 4 months, and the project work has now been finished. The question is how to continue with the project. Some time will have to be invested, probably well over a year, and it probably will not be possible to do it exclusively with work performed by students, but project work has to be done. The company itself will have little incentive because the market is too small, and basically now what we need is several people joining hands and hopefully attracting project funding. Yes, there's nature conversation question. What about the protection of small animals such as hedgehogs? For example, is the robot recognize, will the robot recognize hedgehogs as an obstacle and will it go around it?
Die Ultraschallsensoren funktionieren
Well, the
gut, das
ultrasound
Works, beziehungsweise Crest.
sensors work quite well.
Ja, die haben dann
That's what the companies tell us.
Die anderen Hersteller der Mähroboter machen das auf ein bisschen andere Art und Weise zum Teil. Die erkennen
Various manufacturers have different techniques to recognize obstacles, but they recognize obstacles with at least 5 centimeters width. They also have a certain height. They have to have a certain height. It works quite well. It have to be found out whether it is programmable and whether it can be driven with switched on sensors and whether the posts, well, that they can be approached, that they are not mistaken for an obstacle as such, because the sensors were switched off on the last video. So in other words, that was to avoid from them making a circle around what they thought was an obstacle, namely the post. Right, and one last question. Can the robot also go over damages on the spud? Well, we didn't really test it because we hadn't made enough progress in order to actually test it. I think that it would be difficult from a certain height because then the wheels would start spinning idly. So obviously here some improvements would also have to be done. Okay, so thank you very much for the speakers. So I've heard the question is from our audience in how far the companies are interested in further developing this, and here we will certainly be happy to be hearing further information. Yeah, well, exactly, that is why we wanted to present that, because the company is interested in finding out how much demand there is. If everybody who actually is here today says that it's a nice plaything, but it does not really, it is not really needed, then it doesn't make any sense for the company to further develop it. It doesn't make any sense for me at the university to further develop it. But if I come out of this conference and many people say that we have to do something, then it really certainly is some kind of stimulus and incentive to do something. So if the participants are highly interested, then please do get in touch with NOAC and the university and contact them directly to make sure that this project is further pursued.